All right, let's fire this thing up. Welcome back to Auto Technic, and we have a lot of work ahead of ourselves today. That is because we're going to finally be reinstalling the drivetrain back into this beautiful 99 F355. All right, so how did we even get here? Well, we went into this project with the intentions of just doing a major or timing belt service on this 355. This car was pretty well overdue. I think it was pushing 10 years on its belt service, and mileage, I think it was in probably excess of 10,000 miles. Customer deferred his maintenance. He was finally ready to do it. So that's how we got here and got the engine out. We did find some extra things that we needed to address, which is not uncommon when we do these bigger jobs. But I wanted to take a second and specifically talk about what I would normally be doing just during the timing belt service, because I've done a lot of other work here, and I think it's important to highlight what is standard for the timing belt service and separate from the additional work that I've done. Now, on a major service or a timing belt service on a 355, we're basically addressing all the service items on the car. That's hence the name the major. So all the fluids get replaced. We're talking brake fluid, coolant, power steering fluid, engine oil, gearbox oil, even have the AC evacuated because we have the engine out. So we're addressing all of the fluids. You know, it's getting new oil filters, new air filters, but the majority of the work is focused back here at the engine. Now, obviously, timing belts were done, and we're taking care and replacing all the ancillary belts in the process. Now, what a lot of people do, which I am against, is they will replace only the timing belts and leave the valve covers on. I refer to that as a belt slap. There's a couple downsides to doing that way. One of those issues with a belt slap is you can't get your camshaft gears off to get your front cam seals replaced, which are known to leak. Also, you're leaving your valve cover on, so you can't get your valve cover gaskets replaced, which those, again, also leak. And they also have the problem with pushing out. And if you remember in my early videos, I went through and modified these valve covers so that doesn't happen again, so that's a big benefit. But the biggest benefit is once you have the new timing belts and your new tensioner pulleys on, with the valve cover off, it allows you to run through and check and degree in your camshaft timing. Now, the camshaft timing is critical for how well the car runs, how well it idles, and also the life of your exhaust manifolds. So it's definitely good to go in there and have that periodically checked and corrected. A lot of people skip that, so if they're doing a belt slap and leaving the valve covers on, there is no way that you can check the camshaft timing, and you do not know where it's set at. So with that being done, we also end up replacing a front crankshaft seal. Normally I would take the injectors out and have them cleaned, although the customer on this particular instance chose not to have that done. He was comfortable with them the way they were. And there's some smaller items we take care of, like down here, these check valves that supply the vacuum to the vacuum reservoir and prevent it from bleeding down. I replaced both of those as part of the service. Obviously go and take care of the spark plugs. And I already mentioned it, but the gearbox oil. And really, that's the bulk of it for parts that are being replaced. Other things that we do are the big inspection that I did on the first video of the car. In my opinion, that's all part of the service. So we're checking the integrity of the exhaust system. We're checking the car for any problems. We're checking for faults. Also, on the tail end of the service, there's one last critical thing that we do, and that's where I'm going to take a set of mercury columns and I'm going to run through and balance and calibrate all of the throttle bodies to each other. Now, that's a process that you have to have some special tools to do and a little bit of practice to get that done right. Now, your ITP balance could have an effect on your exhaust manifolds also. If, say, an extreme situation where you have one running really lean, or say maybe one's running really rich. So it is another important thing to check and adjust, and really just all these things are real small items that the car running really nice and ensuring that it's going to run and operate great for the client for years to come. So with all that, there's a few things I wanted to highlight in a little bit more detail before we start getting the engine installed back into the car. Now, one of them is all the mounting hardware up here on these front plates. So we have just this slew of bolts up there, and is what actually happens. I'm going to just have this backwards to show you. These bolts come in from this side. But when this is sitting in place, these bolts should slide through this subframe. Should just do it this way, the right way. They should just slide through the subframe, and you should be able to get them in and all the way ran in and hand tight before you have to tighten them. If you have to put a wrench on it and bring this bolt in, your subframe's not aligned up properly. Now, what happens when you do that is this bolt may be riding on the outside of this hole, and that's going to basically wipe your threads off this bolt as you run this in. The consequence of that, we go to our holes in the frame of the car down there, it can end up basically rolling the threads or rethreading those inserts into the frame of the car. And this is something that happens because these engines come in and out so many times, and you really want to be careful running this in. I'll show you how I get these in and how I adjust everything so I can run these in by hand when we're installing it. But I'm talking about this now because I've gone through with a thread chase and I go over all of these bolts. So I've went through and I chase a thread on all those bolts so they're nice and clean. And I do the same thing on all the holes in the car. I run a thread chase through there. If you don't have a thread chase, you could probably use a tap, but I prefer not to use a tap because they remove material. But I clean out all the threads. There's a lot of dirt in there. In the case of this car, it had anti-seize on it, and that gets all goopy and dirt gets on them from all these years. It gets really dirty, and I want to be sure that when I have everything ready to go in and I'm installing those bolts, I can feed them all the way in by hand, and that I'm not going to have that body of that bolt run down on the side of this engine subframe, wipe the threads on my bolt, and end up damaging the threads in the car. So take a second, be sure you get that taken care of. The other biggie before we get this engine back in is do not forget this hose. This is critical. This hose I have on here loose, but you can see it's sitting at that angle and it's going to attach onto that lower pipe there. We're going to have this hose and slide onto that lower pipe as we lower the body of the car down onto the engine. If you picture with this in the car, the firewall sitting about right there, so we don't have enough room to slide this pipe off of this nipple. This nipple runs about up to there. So you can see that we need 2.5 inches of room and we won't have it. So it gets stuck and we can't slide it off. We can't slide this end off the hard pipe of the car because you can see that the hose is sitting right on the water pump pulley. We have a finger's width of gap in there. So I'm sure that you could get this hose in with the engine in the car. It's going to save yourself a world of hurt having this hose on and loose so you can get everything installed. The only other major thing that you have to keep in mind is our wire harness right here. So it's all prepped and ready to go in. And I talked about this on disassembly because that wire harness feeds through that gap right there on top of the gas tank and body of the car. And if you see that red back there, that's the hole where it feeds into the car. I'll bring you guys up here. So there's the hole right there where that harness comes through. This is our Motronic. So since this car is a Bosch ME 5.2, it just has one Motronic, but we need to run that harness in and connect it up to here. Now, I have a camera set up in the car, and I'm going to try to focus on that harness and showing you how we get that fed through. Space is tight while we're doing this process, but really getting the engine raised back into the car is pretty much the same as it was pulling it out. However, I'm going to try to focus up here on these two things that I didn't show on removal. You can see that my car is prepped, ready to go. The engine's ready to go. Let's get this engine slid under the car, dropped in. All right, so dropping the engine in is pretty straightforward. It starts to get pretty tight when we're at this point. We're probably 12, 14 inches away from going all the way in. Now, I can leave the engine back quite a ways as I lower everything in, but as you get closer to the final position, you need to start pushing the engine forward. It's kind of hard to tell where you need to be, but I cheat, and you can see I use a long extension for these rear vertical bolts, and I run it through the hole for the bolt right here, and I run it down through the hole of the subframe. So I can basically using these as like an alignment dowel here. And you can see that my engine's still rearward too far. Also, I have my wire harness right over there draped on the center of the engine. But now we're close enough where I need to start running that wire harness over the gas tank and getting it on the inside of the car. So that's really the main things I'm focusing on here at this point is going to be the wire harness and just the positioning of the engine. Once we get down lower, the engine's going to be where it's at, and we don't have to worry about the position as much. We're going to have the harness all the way in, and then we're going to be shifting our attention to the radiator hose. So, use our little step stool here, and you can see we got the harness here, and we got to start working it in that hole up there. And it's also further complicated by the fact that we have these other connectors coming off the harness here on the back side, and these bigger guys here. So it's going to take some work to get them fed through, and also we're going to feed it through so the grommet's where it should be, unlike how we found it. So see if maybe I can set you guys down here so I can use two hands. Hopefully you guys can see. So we're just going to work with our Motronic connector. You can see you need to have this clasp shut to start feeding it through. But you're going to feed it in. Make sure these guys are all lined up. Get that up there. And with that, we'll have to jump over. And we can see we're poking through right there. So we'll pull that as much as we can. So this entire connector is, get my foot positioned, it's all the way through the hole. But the tough part's going to be getting those other smaller connectors through. If I jump back over, you can see that my harness is still pretty tight. So that's as far as I'm going to get it for now. As we lower the body of the car down on the engine, we're going to get more slack. We're going to have to keep coming back and working that harness in as we lower everything in and down. So you can see, I talked about it in the first video that it's kind of a little bit of an orchestra with watching the engine, running the lift, and that harness in the car. It's ultimately easier with 3 people, but it's doable with 1 person like I'm doing here. It just takes a little bit more work, a little bit more running around. Just take your time with it. That's all that's really important. You can see that I got the step stool there, so I'm using that to get up in there. And I'm so fortunate that this is a GTS where I can just lean over the door into the car and work. It makes it wildly easier. With that, let's get back to it. So where I'm at now, the subframe that's on the car is actually resting on the subframe that the drivetrain's on. So I need to push the drivetrain forward so they clear. This is right at the junction back where the rear sway bar was, but I have it centered left to right. So we're only going maybe an inch forward. My oil tank, need to move that. And that loud bang you just heard was my extension falling all the way in place. Once I got the subframe pushed forward, everything fell in place, dropped down. Let me grab you, bring you guys in. So what I was fighting was my clearance, get you guys in focus, was my clearance here from this bracket, which is actually part of the car, to the subframe down there. And once I had everything in place, this extension fell all the way down. So I know I'm lined up pretty well. So we got everything positioned. Now we're gonna keep our eye back here, because remember, we got to get those past each other without hitting and interfering. But really, we need to keep feeding that wire harness through. That's going to be the priority number one at this point. All right, our frame is past the subframe. So get up here and we've got to kind of pull this carpet out of the way and get our smaller connectors in. Where's that bigger connector down there? That bigger connector is getting pushed down behind the gas tank right there in the firewall of the car. So I need a hook tool to get that out. Alright. And push this harness back. It's hard to tell if I need to pull more harness in to make that easier, or push some of the harness out. Let me get this other guy. There we go. There's two, just two more. That white connector, it's really tight to fit through with this harness already through the hole. Ooh. There we go, come on. Whew. Tight fit. All right, all that's left, I can see the other connector hanging out back there. I don't know if it's has enough slack to get pulled through just yet. But there's one more connector back there. Whew. Hot. All right, so you can see I have the two smaller connectors. Those ones usually aren't much fuss to get through. Obviously our big main connector. You guys watch me wrestle this guy through. I have it through there. And there's just one more back there that I can see, but I don't think it's ready to come out. It's right there. You can see that guy just sitting there. But if I bring you guys over here, woo! Bring you guys back here. You can see that the harness is pretty tight. I can't really get much more room out of it. And the engine needs to come up. And you can see our hose here where it's going to start getting up to this guy. But I'll get you guys close. You can see that harness. It's pressed against the heat shield for the fuel tank. And I can't really move it. So we got to get the body of the car down lower to get the rest of that harness finessed in. But everything else back there is clear. Another thing to keep an eye for is your oil tank. There's a mounting flange right here. You have to get that on this other side of this cross brace, move that inward. So it's in where it needs to be. I think we're good. Take a peek here. Right there. Keep that oil tank pushed in. So the oil tank is clear here from this brace. That fitting is pretty tight. Here's a great view of the extensions I have, just lining everything up and in. And once we get everything set in place, you can just pop those out and put the bolts in. But it's a real quick, easy way to get everything adjusted and lined up. Those are just standard 3/8 extensions, although they're pretty long. It's 36-inch extension. The other one's a little bit shorter. But you can use what you have. It doesn't really matter what it is. It just makes it a lot easier because you don't have to really crawl down here and focus so much up there. Because if these are lined up, those are positioned where it's not hitting the front of the frame of the car. So with that, everything in here is good. Come over here. Again, this is the critical area back here. Make sure that's all good. And the one thing we talked about on disassembly is you have to loosen the sway bar right here. And that is to get the sway bar past this edge right here. Once it gets close, I'll show you, but the sway bar is basically gonna kind of hit this edge, and we have to unbolt it and have it loose to get it past there. Once we get to that point, it's pretty easy. It kind of just falls in place. But you can see we're pretty close up here to where it's going to be up on our frame. All of our lines, make sure our AC lines are routed where they want. Everything looks pretty good here. I think we can keep trucking. All right. So I saw the body of the car stop, indicating it was bound up on something. But I can see here that the front of the subframe is just sliding into the frame, so everything's free and clear. And our extensions are very loose, so we're lined up well. We'll see if we can keep going. Yeah, we're good. So we're about 4 inches off. Let's revisit our wire harness. All right. I think that last connector's ready. Come through. Oh, lucky me. That was just cake. That's all of the connectors. Whew. I feel like we're bound up on something though. There we go. Position our radiator hose. All right, let's strap you guys in so you can have a look. All right, so we're free and clear back here. You can see that this slide in real nice, and probably a better view of the sway bar right there, or how close it is. It needs to get past that. But we have all of our connectors of the harness through. We don't have the rubber grommet through, but I wait until the very end. Essentially, I can pull this harness in as we get the engine the rest of the way in. And then once the subframe's fully in place, I can come back and work on that grommet. That doesn't need to be done now, but getting all the connectors does need to be done now. So you can see this wasn't too bad. It's a little bit of work and finesse. It would be a lot nicer if I could just push that all the way through than raise the engine off, but this is how it is. Get you guys up here, and you can see that I have the coolant hose lined up for that nipple because we're maybe an inch or two away. And you can see that the harness below it kind of has a little bit of a kink still going up over the gas tank. So once I send this engine down the rest of the way, I'm going to be able to pull the rest of that harness through. There's essentially no slack in there. It's pretty much ran straight tight up into the body of the car. So our points of focus now is our coolant hose and the harness. We're good on the back. And if we drop you up here, you can see we're already sliding into the body of the car. So with that, I think we're good. We'll give it one more look over and get her the rest of the way on. All right. So we got to go back up. Because our flanges for our muffler was hitting our cats. And that reminds me, I forgot to put a strap on here for the muffler. I actually have this one over here we can use for that. Rusty. It's been too long. There you go. This strap is going to hold the muffler away because it was sitting on top of the exhaust flanges and binding everything up, so I needed to pull it away just a hair. Be sure you don't tighten that too much. It could crack the bumper, just a little snug, Doesn't need a lot. So we're continue to be good back there now. And saw us get bound up just a little bit. There we go. It was the muffler again, but now they're slid over, so we're fine. Our bypass is slid back, sliding past our subframe here. Let's check on our coolant hose. Oh, look at that. Let me grab you guys. Grab a light too. Alright, so our strap pulls the muffler back, so those flanges slide past. You can see right there where it's now sliding past. So, I forgot that, but that's alright. We got it taken care of. So everything's still lined up. You can see that this exhaust bypass needs to remain loose, so it slides past this bar. You can tell that we're a couple inches off because it slides back and kind of sits over this bar in final assembly, so that's still loose. Right here, you can see our sway bar. Grab this light. This is a problem. We're going to have to get this sway bar moved because it's completely underneath that subframe. That's not going to work. So we'll come up here and I'll get that taken care of. But the other thing, what we really came here for, is our hose. If I can get, I don't need the stool, I don't think. Get in here, that light. Look at that guy. Today seems to be my day, because that hose is pretty much where it needs to be. So with a little pick tool here, slide that guy in. We should be able just to walk this in. A little tough with one hand. Like that. And the hose is started on our hard pipe. I love it. So I'm going to need to set you guys down so I can work this sway bar in position. And we are almost there. We're about 2 inches away. All right, got the sway bar moved up in position. It is pretty tight. It's kind of wedged under there right now, but it's going to pop in place. And our harness is good. Our coolant hose is good. Take this down. The sway bar is on top. Our hose is pretty much on. We get more of our harness through. There we go. More of the harness through. I have to come back for that grommet. So we can take these out. All right, our extensions are out. I have the bolts just sitting in there. It's time to grab the camera and show you what we have, because I mentioned it, the car's not level, so meaning I'm probably too low on the front of the subframe and not far enough back or high enough on the back of it. So I'll grab the camera and I'll show you exactly what I have here. All right, so I'm back here at the left rear, and you can see that I have 1/2 inch from the subframe of the car to the drivetrain subframe. And you can see my other mounting hole, if I drop the light in, that they don't line up. So we still need to lower the car down some. However, if I bring you back to the front up here, and bear with me, this is pretty tight on space. You can't really see, but this is one of our upper holes for the subframe. And with a tapered punch, I can slide that in, and you can see that our subframe is too high. And this is something I anticipated because I encountered this when I was removing the drivetrain, and this all stems from how I have the car on the rack. I actually have the car sitting a little bit higher in the rear than I do in the front, and I do that on purpose when I'm racking the car because it gives me better weight distribution with the engine being back here and this being a non-asymmetrical lift. I can get this all the weight kind of shifted forward on the car a little bit. It is a little bit of a fine, balance because we had to take into account that we removed the subframe from the car and we didn't want it to be too front heavy. That would have been bad. But because I have the car racked at such an angle, we have this problem now. So as tempting as it may be, I don't want to run these bolts tight and use just the bolt itself to suck that gap up. By doing so, I'm going to put a tremendous amount of stress back here on the body. What I need to do is I need to get the car bumped up with the lift just a little bit so I can get the bolts started up here on the front. I'm going to do the same thing for both sides. So I'm going to actually take the lift. I'm going to raise the car up a little bit so I can get those bolts started. Once I have, maybe 4 on each side started, just a couple threads in is all it takes. Then we're going to come back here and deal with the back side. So let's come over here. Give it a little bump. And we'll come back around and we'll see how good we are for these guys back here. Just get it. That feels pretty good. See if we can run this hardware in. Close. Maybe we'll give it another little bump. See what that did for us. Ooh, I think that's too much, judging by the paint shadow. Yep, that's too much. Got to come down a little. So I'm going to continue working this, get those bolts started. I'll bring you guys right back with me once they're all in. Okay, so you can see just the 2 bottom ones I have in here, and you can see that they're ran all the way in. I was able to do that by hand. I do use a long tapered punch in one of the holes to help pull it and position it. But again, those are just finger tight. I did get one of the upper ones in as well, so there's 3 on this side that are in. And on the driver's side, I actually ended up getting 5 of the 6 in. So we're in good shape up here, and we have the front of the cradle bolted to the frame of the car. And now we have the true gap right here. You can see right, this light set up right there. So you can see our gap where we need to bring up the subframe. So we're too low back here. And you can see I have my floor jack, and it's much of the same way I addressed this when I was taking the engine out. The floor jack is positioned up underneath my cradle that I have the drivetrain on. And now I can just bring that up. You can see the bolts fall right in place. Bring that up and tight. Those are in place. You can't see, but I bet you I can feed that bolt all the way through right now. Grab this guy. And nope, we're going to need to give a little pry on that. So we'll have to just shift that a little. There we go. That slides in, and also, can't really see it, but these are tapered and they have seats that they sit into, and now those are in place, and I can probably grab this hardware right here and start to run it in. So with that being said, I'm going to get the rest of this hardware in, get everything tightened down, and we'll address what's next. we have it. We have the engine back in the car. Subframe bolts are all torqued to the spec and tight, so it's all locked in and we're ready to go. Now, I can't stress enough, you don't want to suck those rear bolts up with you have that height difference like I had. You're gonna stress the back body of the car. You don't want to do that, especially in the 355s. Already have issues with the joint of the buttress right back here in that corner. Use your floor jack to bring that up. Now, again, the same thing with the floor jack like I mentioned. Those bolts up at the front, those 6 bolts on those plates that hold everything in, I will get those ran in by hand. If I have to make any adjustments, I will bring my floor jack up in there. But I do that once I have all of the bolts in the car hand tied in. So I'll have the rear bolts hand tight, the shock tower bolts hand tight, and like the 4 that we had or 5 that we had up on the front, we'll have those in hand tight. Then I can raise the car, get my cradle out from underneath of it, and that lets me get the car a little bit higher, have a little bit more working room, and then I'll still use the floor jack and I'll use a long punch, and I can use that punch in between one of the empty holes, and I can use that to shift everything where I run those bolts in hand tight. And then you can snug one of those down once you have 5 in, and once it snugs it down, it holds everything in place. You can run the 6th one in, and then go ahead and run through all your torque of all the bolts. I torque the front bolts first, down at the bottom, then I come back and do my rear bolts, and finally the shock tower bolts. So now that that's all in, done, and torqued, we have her back where she belongs. And really is what I want to show you. Let me grab my light, because now I can get the car lower to the ground. And hopefully you can get in here so you can see everything's real tight and busy up here. And you can see that I can't even get my hand in to show you guys. Right up here, we got that radiator hose on. Now I did forget to spray some glass cleaner on that hose. I've talked about that in several of my videos to help kind of lubricate it so it slides on. So it was an absolute bear to get worked up onto that neck. Definitely don't do that to yourself. Spray a little glass cleaner in there before you lower everything in. It's going to make it a lot easier. But nonetheless, we have it in and installed. You can see that this other heater hose really is in the way, blocking the view of it. And if you look carefully, you can just barely see my harness right here running underneath of it. And the harness is running up into the car. There's pretty much no slack, so we're good there. And you can see it gets real busy up here because we have this other heater hose down here, this guy, which we have to put onto the water pump. We have our throttle cable here we're gonna have to take care of. Obviously the upper radiator hose, but over in that corner up there, we have our power steering hose. We have this hard line, which that one's a little tricky, a soft line, a vacuum line. Quite a bit of stuff to hook up there. And really, I would say that taking care of all the connections up here is kind of the last big hurdle on assembly. Sure, we have a bunch of harnesses and connections to deal with back here, but they're all pretty straightforward, and you have plenty of working room. It's not too bad. So my preferred approach on reassembling this engine is I basically work in quadrants, essentially. So I'll raise the car up, get as much done from underneath the car that I can on all the sections, and kind of work my way around. Lower the car down, hit the wheel wells, get as much done as I can there, lower the car all the way to the ground, do as much as I can on the top, and then go back and do any touch-ups if I have to at that point. So moving forward on the rest of the reassembly is what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to focus on getting this car put back together. On my disassembly video, I covered that in great detail on all the steps to get this disassembled. So is what my focus will be this time for you guys is getting the camera in there nice and tight so you guys can see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it on the reassembly, because really all the steps are going to be the opposite of what we use to get to this point. I'll bring you back for some key points that we still need to talk about, the tricky areas. One of those being finishing up this wire harness and getting that grommet out. So anything that I come up upon that's a little tricky or worth talking about that needs a little extra attention, I'll bring you guys back for that. And hopefully we can get this thing buttoned up in pretty short order. Well, you can see that everything came together pretty quick, and it is fully reinstalled and completely reassembled. Now it is dry, meaning I don't have any fluids in the car yet, but back here in the engine bay, we're pretty much taken care of. Now, once we do get it running, we're gonna have to come back and double check the adjustment on our exhaust. I also need to fine tune things like the parking brake adjustment. I just kind of roughed it in. But for the most part, everything's installed, hooked up, connected, ready to fire the car off, with the exception of fluids. And bring you guys in here, our wire harness for our Motronic. So we need to get this all connected and all these plugs connected back in, but I've left it loose because you can see this is exactly how it was when it came in, when I got the car. Our rubber grommet is not pulled through on that wire harness. The harness is through the hole, but I need to get that rubber grommet slid through there. So this is going to be a little bit of work, but it's really not too manageable to get that harness pulled through. I'm going to try to get a camera set up in there, much like we did when we pushed the harness through on the engine assembly. So that way you guys can see me going through the process of getting it pulled back through the firewall for that grommet and getting it installed. I'm a little nervous that I'm going to be physically blocking the camera on trying to see what I'm doing. But either way, we're going to give it a shot. I'm going to set you guys down. We're going to get that grommet pulled through, all of our Motronic connections buttoned up, and then we'll start working on getting all of our fluids in the car. And really, we're only maybe an hour away from cranking this car off. So with that, to the wire harness. See what we're working with. Okay, so I can see a good section of that grommet. It's actually it's a lot closer here. It's maybe only an inch back on the top over here on the right side, but on the left side, it's quite a ways back, but I have a lot of working room right here. So I should be able to get a pair of pliers in there and get a hold of it. So see if we can't do this. Got a hold of it, just kind of working the harness around so that way it frees up the grommet. Trapped on the bottom. There we go. So I'm using the harness to trap the grommet in place, and then trying to work the rest of this grommet in. Almost there. There we go. And our grommet is in. Let me drop you guys in for a closer look. All right, there you have it. Our grommet is fully reinstalled all the way through the firewall as it should be. Let's see back over here on this side. So it really wasn't too bad. Just took a minute or two with a long pair of needle nose pliers, a little bit of patience, and got it through as it should. So with that being said, I'm going to continue on getting the rest of the stuff connected and bolted down in here. We will start here with our Motronic connection. And you really don't have enough space to get this connector on with the Motronic in place. So I just unbolt it, slide it on, and get that in place. And I do it this way because that kind of sets in place this wire harness. You can see we got some connectors down here, but that kind of establishes where and how this harness is going to sit. So these connectors to each other. There's really no way to get any of these connectors in here wrong. Get those in. And those guys sit down about right there. So it's kind of a free-for-all down here at the connectors. They just kind of hang out where they want to be. And these guys will just kind of tuck underneath the carpet. And this free space right there. Because that trim panel that goes over this bulges out, covers all this stuff up. This one we leave open because this is our diagnostic connector for our Motronic. We're going to be connected up to this in a second. And we have this guy here, this connector and this ground wire. And before we button that up, actually you got to leave this disconnected so we can get access to our screw. Be sure we capture this ground wire. All right, we're all buttoned up and everything's good for now. We're going to leave our cover off because, as I mentioned, I want access to my connector so we can run our diagnostics. But now, let's shift our focus and get some fluids in here. All right, so let's get some oil in this thing. And customer gave me this oil to put in the car. It's Pennzoil 540. Pennzoil, which you guys may or may not know, is basically the U.S. division of Shell. You really don't see Shell oil over here in the North America. That's European countries, pretty common, just relabeled. And I think we all know that Ferrari and Shell have been in bed together for quite a while. So this is essentially as close as we're getting to factory approved oil over here stateside. Now with that, this car will take roughly 8 liters of oil, or 8 quarts. And I don't put all 8 in on one shot. I do that, get this bottle up. We're hitting the frame here. I do that because if we put all 8 in right now in the oil tank, our oil level is just going to be too high. So I usually put in about 5 liters, and then I will go fire the car up. Once the car is running, I'll put in the other 3 liters to bring the oil level up. Again, it's a dry sump system, so we have so much oil in the tank. Even running 3 liters low, it's not going to affect anything. It's a little bit lower in the tank, but we're still getting all the oil we need on the pickup. Now I do that because if we overfill the tank, and if you pour all the oil in at once, that's where I talked about several times that can actually pull a lot of the oil in through your breather lines, in through your intake track, and through the engine, which is what we don't want. I'll say a 355 is not as susceptible to do that as other cars. And my 5-liter rule kind of comes from what I used to do at the dealership, just out of routine, because all of the oil that we had was bulk, and the bins that we had to use to put it in the car was 5 liters. So I used to just fill up one bin, put it in the car. I would fill it up again with the other 3 liters, and then just fire the car off and add that in. So really, that's how that method came around. It's worked quite well for me over the years, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And I apologize for the noise that we have in the background. I have my vacuum pump running, pulling the AC down right now, so that way we can get the AC charged and, you know, all of the fluids and liquids in the car. I already have done the power steering fluid. I filled that up off camera. And I will say, one thing I'd like to do in power steering fluid to help prevent any foaming or aeration is I fill the reservoir up, and then I'll get in the car and move the steering wheel, go back and forth, lock the lock several times. And that helps work out any massive air pockets or bubbles in the steering system and prevents any chance that I'm going to aerate that fluid. I don't know if any of you have ever aerated your power steering fluid, but it's like a compounding problem because the more it gets aerated, the more it foams, and it foams over, makes a huge mess. In this case, it'd be pretty bad since it's sitting right on top of all of our belts. So that was taken care of. And then also for our gearbox, I filled that up previously when it was out of the car just because it was a lot easier. And we have fresh 7590 in there. And again, once the car is fully up to temperature, we're going to come back and confirm all of our fluid levels, but we're just getting our baseline fill right now. All right, there's our 5 liters of oil in for now. And now that that's done, let's shift over and take care of our coolant. Alright, so to fill our coolant, I use an airlift system. So we're going to pull a vacuum on the cooling system, and that helps me determine that I don't have any gross leaks. And it also helps get all the coolant in without any air pockets. I've had actually dang near 100% success using this method without getting air pockets in the cars. I really prefer it. So we have our adapter installed, and we're going to pull this down as far as we can vacuum wise. And we're just going to go until it no longer can pull a deeper vacuum and disconnect everything. And you can see I use a rag on the end of this hose because I found that sometimes it'll capture some coolant in here and kind of spray coolant everywhere and makes a bit of a mess. So I just throw a rag over there just in case any extra comes out, and I don't spray it over the engine bay. We're almost down on 25. And if memory serves me correct, 25 is about the limit. I don't think I'm going to get much more than that. Stand corrected. I'm realizing that I have more air pressure at home than I used to, so we're past 25, 26, 27. Alright. Shut it off. Alright, so we got that pulled down about 27 inches of vacuum, and you know, I remember it used to be about 25, but as I mentioned, I'm running a bit more air pressure here at my home shop than we had at the dealership, so that doesn't totally surprise me. So now that that's sitting there and everything's disconnected, we're going to let that sit for a couple minutes, and I want to be sure that that vacuum doesn't bleed off. Because if it does bleed off, that's indicating I have a pretty big leak, and I don't see much point in putting that coolant in and then making a huge mess and then chasing down that leak. So if we bleed our vacuum, I'll start looking around and seeing why I have a leak. But for now, it's holding strong. We're going to give it a couple minutes, and then we're going to come back and get our coolant in the car. All right, we're looking good. So just move over to our fill adapter, and we have our coolant. I mixed it with distilled water. Now the coolant that I'm using is BMW coolant, and it's the HOA technology, so hybrid organic acid. Basically, this specific coolant, I've used it for years, so I'm accustomed to it, and I know it and I like it. It's readily available. But the HOAT coolant is going to have less corrosion in the engine long term, so if the coolant is not getting replaced as frequently, if the customer is stretching his services, this isn't going to have as much of an effect on the metals as some of the older, more basic coolants. So really, this stuff is essentially the same price, doesn't come mixed. That's why I mixed it 50-50. And by the time you end up mixing it, so 1 gallon is essentially 2, it's the same price as any other coolant out there, really. Easy to get. That's my go-to. Carefully set this up here. Crack open our fill. And the car is going to do all the work for us. Now, one thing that's important on this is I watch the gauge. So once it gets to about 5 on that vacuum gauge, I stop filling the system. If I let this suck all the way through and equalize so there's no longer a vacuum, the reservoir is going to be overfilled and I'm going to have to suck some out. So I keep an eye on that gauge. I stop short, which will pretty much give me maybe an inch or 2 in the reservoir. Sometimes it's a little low, but I'd rather come back and add more than have to suck coolant out. So we're going to let this drink it up and consume it all. This one's going to take a little bit more than usual because we had the heads off. We'll keep an eye on our gauge once everything equalizes. And we're almost there. Almost ready to hear this thing run. Dropping right down to 5. Once it gets to 5, I just pull this out. And you heard it kind of gurgle and suck. And we're good. And I have maybe 3/4 of a gallon of coolant left in there. So try to get this to drain. And let's see how we did on our fill level. Oof. Overfilled. Missed the mark. We'll have to suck some out. There you go. All right, so here's the deal. We got all of the fluids in the car. So our gearbox is full, our coolant's full, power steering's full, oil, most of the way full. We're gonna get that topped off once it's fired off. AC, again, most of the way full. I need to get the car running so I can get the AC pressures down to suck it in through the low side. But we're basically set on all the fluids. Now I did pull the fuel pump fuse so I could crank the engine over until I was able to build some oil pressure. I gave it a little bit more after I was able to build the oil pressure, and my aim with that was to get some oil up in the top end of the heads so we're not only relying on that assembly lube. Now that's not something that I would do just typically during a belt service because there's enough oil up there, but since we had the heads off and everything is so dry, I just want to do everything I can to be sure that it has all the lubrication it needs when it fires off. So with that being said, we have everything set up over here. I got the SD1 set up, ready to read in the car. The key is on. I got my stabilized power supply on the car just in case, because it's been sitting here for a while actually, and I was messing around on the SD1 a little bit. I think it's time, finally, to set you guys down and crack this thing off. All right, let's fire this thing off. Almost. Get my fan turned on. Alright, she's running pretty good. Just sitting there permanent idle, letting it build some heat and get up the temperature. You see, the only warning lights we have on is our suspension light, which is normal. We got our AC cruising. We're at 44 degrees right now. So we got that taken care of. We topped off our oil. Come back over here, SD1. This kicked me out, so I had to cycle the key. And you can see this is pretty quick, although you got to navigate with the keys. It's actually one of my favorite testers that we have. And we'll check it for faults right now. So anything with a fault is going to show up the red dot. And that was me with the key, so we're not worried about that one. We'll bring it over. Keep an eye on our parameters here. So this is just reading all the statuses of the ECU, engine temperature, airflow rate, air intake temp, throttle angles. Got good voltage. And our O2 sensors here, additive values. So even though this system's so old and primitive, I don't know, there's something about it, I always like using it. It works all the time, every time. It's a pretty good system. So we'll keep that up and just keep an eye on everything. And like I said, we're gonna let the car run. let it build some temperature and make sure, you know, all of our fluids are set. Make sure we don't have any leaks, and it's running nice. Sounds good. All right, so our oil's up to about 180. So we'll see where we're at on oil level. Just a hair below the minimum mark. I think I'm gonna leave that right there until I go drive the car, really get heat in it, then come back and check the level, because that's really what matters. I don't want to fill it up too much and overfill it like I did with the coolant. So we're on the dipstick. We'll be good for the first drive. Alright guys, taking another peek, and just sitting here idling, no error stored, that's good. Jump over our parameters, we're all the way up to temp, and we've had our fans cycling, and everything's in line. It's looking pretty good, idling good. No warning lights, no slow down light, just the pesky suspension light. It's looking pretty good. Took a peek around, there's no leaks, nothing on the ground. AC's cold. Shut her down. So, actually I'll come over here and kill this fan too. I gotta say, that was a good day. We got the 355 up and running again. Able to listen to that beautiful exhaust. They nailed it from the factory at these 355s. They sound so good. But the car's running, everything, all indications that it's nice and healthy. We don't have any faults jumping up on our SD1. We don't have any warning lights showing up on our instrument cluster. I don't see any visible leaks coming from the top of the engine. There's nothing hitting the ground. Granted, I need to get the car raised up in the air, look underneath, and be sure that there's no leaks or drips or anything out of place from the bottom. But really, it fired up, idled great, all indications that it's set, it's good to go. But we still have a ton of work ahead of us. Well, maybe not a ton. You can see, for one, the shop's a mess, so I need to get that taken care of. But for the car, there's still quite a bit of work. On reassembly of the car, considering I have everything to do in the trunk, if you notice, I got the bumper off on the front. Haven't talked about that, but I will. But I need to get the front bumper back on, all my wheel wells, rear wheel wells, all my fender liners, the wheels, the bonnet, all the covers for the ECUs in the car that I took off. There's just a lot to reassemble on the car before I can get it on the road and actually drive it. I mean, really, there's probably more than half of a day worth of work to get everything buttoned up and taken care of. So what my plan of attack is, let the car sit overnight, neutralize, let the temperature come down. I'll check over everything. I'll fire it back up tomorrow, get it up to temperature, and well, that's because tomorrow I'm going to be balancing the throttle bodies or synchronizing the ITBs, which will be a separate video, not on today's video. But we're going to do that. Then I'm going to let it cool down again because it's actually my Friday tomorrow. Let it sit over the weekend, then I'll come back next week. I can give it one more heat cycle. If everything's good, gets a clean bill of health, nothing out of place, then I'm going to go through the process to get all the under trays on, wheel wells, everything we talked about, get the car fully reassembled, back together, then we're going to take it back out for one more final road test, confirm everything's good. Alright guys, you know the drill. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the video. Also, more importantly, get in the comments section. Let me know what you thought. And remember the deal. When you're in the comments section, I want to hear the city, state, and country where you're viewing the video from. I want to see the reach that these videos are making it out there. And it's just fun to see where everyone's at. Now, with that being said, I think that's all for today, guys. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one.